Morning. Now that they've said everything there is to say, I'm going to refute. No, actually, interesting as you think of, stop and think, and I was thinking about this for a couple of weeks about what am I going to say, and I didn't really delve into it till last night. But sometimes we try to make forecasting a little too difficult, too complex, too magical. But it'll boil down to a couple things, and I'll reference that in a little bit. I think Tracy hit it right on the head. And I'll try to interweave a little bit of what each of the three have already said. But let me ask you a question, because we're talking about everybody's upbeat right now, right? So how many of you feel better about the quality of life and their situation over the last 3 years, since the last 3 years? How many of you feel better? All right. How many of you either live or work in Hamilton County? Okay. So almost everybody, actually. Well, here's a statistic that's coming out in a bit of research that we've just completed, and we're going to share with you and others and use it in community work too. Hamilton County, over the respondents to this survey, 215 out of 1,500 that we did in the metro area, said 43% of them said that they feel better about where they are today than they were 3 years ago. Compare that nationally, it's 20% higher than what the nation thinks, 20%. And unfortunately, if some of you are living or working in Shelby County, so we've done this by county too, only 9% feel that way. So we have a big difference in our whole metro area in terms of how we're feeling and what's going on in the business, I'm sure. On the negative side of that, if you ask the reverse question of that, Central Indiana ranks about 20% higher than the nation in terms of thinking that we've gone the opposite direction in the last 3 years. So that may be one of the most encouraging things in terms of if it's an index that we want to think about going forward. Let me compare a couple things with our region nationally. You heard a couple short snippets, but let me compare about affordability. And think about this from the standpoint of gain in equity of your customers and anybody that owns a home. So go back, if you go back 3 years, and these are 3-year statistics, people in Central Indiana who own a home have a gain of about $13,000 in equity. Nationally, it's about 5. If you go back 7 years, this is really striking. $5,000 gain in equity. So a little bit less, that's been the tough period of time. Negative 43,000 around the country on average. So again, just position, how we are positioned going forward. And in the last 9 years, it's been about 0. So for the last decade, it's been about a 0 gain around the country. And our homeowners enjoy about a 9% or a $9,000 equity gain. Home ownership rates, Jim and Tracy alluded to that also. We're still almost 5% ahead of the country. Things that may impact that still are some of the negative press, as Tracy mentioned. But also a desire to see what's the difference between the cost of living in an apartment versus the cost of owning a home. And those costs now have begun to switch too. Price to income nationally. Again, this is an important one for messages, I think, to potential customers, is the cost of housing in our market is about 1.3 median price to income. Nationally, it's about 2.5, and that's pretty historical. So we're half as expensive, basically, in terms of affordability of owning a home, and that's just owning a home. So let's turn to our market just for a few minutes. The average sale price at the end of December for the quarter was $160,000 plus. That's the first time in the last 10 years that that's been that high, interestingly. And for the month of December itself, it was about 159 and change. And there was only 11 months out of the last, I think it was 72, so what's that, 6 years, is that the math? Last 72, that has been that high or higher. So it seems to be being sustained, and that's where we get to some of the simple math. New listings are the lowest that we've had in the last 12 years. This is new listings. The inventory level is now at levels equal to 01. And closed sales this year, remember how we jumped so drastically, and Jim alluded, in fact, don't think we'll get there for a while, and maybe we don't want to for a while, because maybe those were exaggerated. But we're back to the 02 levels in terms of closed sales in 2012. So again, think about what that means to how you do your business going forward. New construction, Jim talked about that. There's actually 487 homes that are listed as new construction in the VLC right now. Well, that may not sound like a large number out of 12,000, but it still is about the highest percentage of homes, the new homes listed in the VLC that we've seen in about 10 years as a percentage of listing. So that's sort of a report on our market. Sometimes we worry about what's the impact of distressed properties. Our foreclosure report that we do quarterly is coming out this week. And one of the things it's going to tell you is that those percentages and those numbers are down. Although last year, and here's some drastic differences between how our counties in the metropolitan area were, 40% and 34% of sales in Shelby County and in Madison County last year were foreclosed properties or distressed properties. Pretty healthy. And sometimes that's been as high as 50%. Hamilton County, what would you guess? A little under 10%, 9.7%, which is now back to a more normal rate historically. So if that inventory is truly out of the system, then we'll see some additional prompting of pricing for all properties. I mentioned a survey that we've just completed. I want to just reference two because it'll whet your appetite to make sure you go to these surveys, because these are both fully available to you. One was just reported to you in Fast Tracks the other day, and another would be coming out probably in about it as soon as we determine when to release it. One's a survey of consumers about particularly buyers, and just a trend that changed in the last year has been that married couples, the percentage of married couples who have purchased homes has increased again, both locally and nationally. So I don't know if you think about that with your buyers, but that's just a snippet of what kind of information is in this report that you might want to pay attention to. We're also had just completed what we call a community preference survey, which delves into why people determine where they want to live. And some of you participated in our membership survey and asked about, we just focused on schools basically and how important that was. But again, when this comes out to you, you'll see some important things about that in terms of preferences. For example, quality of life, that's where I talked about earlier that 43% of Hamilton County respondents feel better about 3 years ago today than they do about 3 years ago. So I just urge you to delve into that, because there's a lot of good information about why people choose not just where they want to live, but what kind of housing they want to live in. And we think it's going to have some value to our builder friends too, to see the results of the survey, particularly over the next few years. All right, let me just finish with a couple of why be encouraged. I got 4 things that either I've heard or I've witnessed just in the last week. These first 2 are from Lender, as recently as yesterday. Lender who's they're changing their strategy and their expectations over the next 3 years. It'll be a complete reverse. Refis have accounted for about 75% of the business. New financing, 25%. The next 3 years, they see that flip-flopping, 75% new financing. Now that should be encouraging to everybody in this room. And also, Lender also said specifically in Hamilton County are going to double the number of its sales force in Hamilton County because of the upside in the market. So again, that should be encouraging. And the last two are sort of anecdotal, but we just finished the Mybor Ball on Saturday night, and it was the best year that we've ever had in terms of sponsorships. And that should be a true indicator. We had over $60,000 of sponsors from our members, affiliate, and realtor companies alike. And finally, in terms of encouragement, there's a guy in the audience that actually paid this. I won't tell you what it was. But we have a new index in helping predict the future. It's called the Sullivan Dinner. And my wife and I, Tina and I, each year for probably about 18 years now, an auction off a dinner at our house. This year it went for, well, I'll say, it went for $1,500 to come have dinner at our house. Okay? There's only been about 3 years in that 20 years that has gone higher than that. So that's a great indicator, right? Okay. And the only two things to caution, I think, that you should keep in mind is one, that what is the shadow inventory? Is it really out there, and is it still really coming? And Indianapolis still lags in job growth compared to many areas of the country. Not necessarily the Midwest, but many other areas of the country. So where will those people come from? Thank you.